But
Maybe a little whistling.
that was, yes, it's, there's that frustration. Yeah. It's good.
Second.
machine. All right, let's start with any public comments for items not on the agenda for discussion and not action. Start time 7 p.m. So any public comments for items not on the agenda? All right, seeing none, let's move on to town reports.
Town administrator report, just a couple of things on it. The first one is, hiring employees. We are still in the process of, trying to find a deputy clerk position. Chris and I have looked through a handful of resumes that have been received in the last couple of weeks. And we are going to try to, see if any of them are worth setting up interviews with. Hopefully a couple will look promising. In the meantime, Kathy Quince has agreed to come back 1 day a week with the town. And we also had Hannah Hatfield, who has connections to the island, reached out, has experience working with municipalities. So she is coming out 1 day a week. And so that allows us to be able to cover 16 out of the 24-hour position that we're short in the office for the deputy clerk position. Any questions about that? The next is the dredging update. So it's something that I had been updating you on for the last couple of meetings. Just letting you know that on October 6th, they were going to, and they did come out. So Army Corps and Croc came out for a coordination meeting. Matt was there from CTC, Gennaro, the harbor officer, and myself were there. The work is scheduled to begin on November 1st. They said that they're expecting to be on site for a couple of weeks, which is a big change from what they had initially, or from what Army Corps had initially said, which was going to be a couple of days to a week. It is anticipated that the dredging is going to take place at nighttime. So there should be very little interference to the fishermen that would use the area where they tend to unload. The gentleman who's going to be the head of the dredging was on site. And he said that he will work with the town in whatever way they need to ensure that it doesn't interfere with any of the fishermen. And that all parties are happy. Gennaro was going to connect individually with some fishermen just to make sure that they were aware of the situation and knew what to expect. CDC will stay in touch with the crew. They have a radio communication that they're going to have set up. So then if there are any ongoing issues or CTC needs to move temporarily up forward towards the other floats, that they will be able to quickly communicate that they are not in their way, and CDC is also able to still provide the emergency services if needed. They are expected to have somebody come out here before November 1st to do some survey work, but other than that, that is the expected timeline for dredging. Any questions? The next thing is the road, not the road, the shore stabilization repair work that is taking place down at the end of Soul Road, with the Soul Road right away to shore being impacted by it. I have been receiving communications from the property owners. The work was anticipated to start this week, but there has been delays, and so the engineers are scheduled to barge some of their things to the island this week. They didn't know when it was going to take place, so in the next week or so, work should be good down there. And then the last thing is just the road signs. So last meeting, the board directed Public Works to put up a number of signs around the island. They put them up. They took pictures of all the signs that they put up. I have not heard of any being taken down yet, but that has been done. So that is what I have on the TA report. There's Public Works report in the packet as well, just outlining the work that they've done over the last month, and then the harbor master provided a report. I did not receive one from the fire department. And then the other two, coastal waters and then planning board, which members are here on behalf of those boards.
Maybe coastal waters, I know.
Sure,
Speak up.
very quickly,
Herb, could you step up?
yeah. Herb Main, Secretary of the Coastal Waters Commission. We had a meeting on October 11th. Since the minutes aren't ready for you to look at, I thought I would just report on them briefly. There are 4 new applications for aquaculture spots, 2 on the east side of the island, 2 on the west side of the island. The commission recommended that all 4 be assigned by the harbor master, and we discussed the various questions that he has to answer on his questionnaires, and we go through the bullet sheet and answer all those. The result of all of those was that we should go ahead and sign those and move those forward. We did have one reservation about one of the leases that is near Crow Island, just off the boatyard. The main concern came down to there's a slightly extended period from the traditional period for these things. That was deemed by the commission as possibly impacting navigation because of the shoulder periods. So we did, by consensus, decide to write a letter with that sentiment to DMR. And I thought I would have a draft of it tonight. The chair was tasked to do that, but he didn't get that, so we don't have a draft of that. That's the intent of the board. I verified with him tonight that that was still the intent of the commission. Otherwise, we talked about the grant. If we signed the contract for the HMA grant, it close. Did we return that?
The contract had been signed and had been sent, and then they accidentally missed that they had received it back at the end of August. That was the email that I had CC'd you on. So the contract is signed.
Okay.
There was a mishap that they lost track of it.
We signed the contract?
It was, the contract, or you mean the actual grant documentation?
Not the application, but the contract.
No, that hasn't been provided.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
sorry.
But we have it, we just haven't signed it. They've signed it.
I guess maybe there's confusion about,
Okay, let's hear my talk.
yeah, document.
Okay. Anyways, I reported that we had a contract. Maybe, we'll straighten that out. The only other item was discussion of applying some boat ramp. Gennaro asked for some help with that, and I offered to do that, which I haven't done yet. That's my report. Any questions? Thank you.
Any thoughts from the board on that one application that might present some hazards to navigation based on the timing of it? Any thoughts of the select board sending a letter to the DMR? We have no official role. Coastal Waters and especially the harbor master have an official role in the process, but we certainly have the ability to weigh in if we need to. Anybody have any thoughts on that?
Is that an experimental lease?
Yes. All for one.
So there is no public hearing, and you're not,
If they get, I think if they get 5 letters of concern, they will hold.
but you're not requesting.
We are not explicitly requesting that. We are just expressing our sentiments. Yeah.
Did you have some more?
I attended the Coastal Waters meeting where they discussed this. And first of all, I'd like to say that I think the Coastal Waters Committee is doing a really good job at going down through the applications and keeping it, consistent and even. And I think that the concern is, a somewhat valid one. It's mostly, not just the location, although the location extends out further than maybe people would like it to, but the fact that they changed the time that it goes in and the time that it comes out. So, I would be fine if the board was willing to send in a letter, also stating that we had some concern about, the issuance of this with the change of the time of the, availability of going in and coming back out. That's just me.
Carol?
So what is it we're asking for? A change in the time frame, a change in the location? What is it we're looking for?
What sounds like Coastal Waters is doing is expressing concern. I'm not sure, but I believe what DMR reacts to is 5 letters, not 5 requests for a hearing, but 5 letters. I could be wrong on that, but I think that's the case. Anybody?
I'm not worried about the hearing, I'm just, did you have a specific request from DMR that you wanted to in fact retract timeframe back to what people normally do?
We didn't, we recommended go ahead and sign the lease. We really kind of want to get on record as saying, we're looking at these things, concerned about these issues. I don't know that the commission felt like anything should change. However, I should let you know that the chair and the applicant had a conversation, and the applicant was fine changing the time frame. So I don't think it's an important point. I think the letter is more an indication of a placeholder for DMR to know that we're looking at these things rationally and thoroughly, and that we do have concerns.
Mark? Yeah, and I think Herb's correct with his description of how they discussed it and ended it at the meeting. So hearing that again, I think probably is probably not worth this board's efforts to send something in where Coastal Waters is already doing it on behalf of the town.
Anybody else? Does that work for everybody? All right. Thanks, Herb. Comments from the public, Paul?
As a potentially impacted party, I do plan to write a letter to the state regarding the second application. But I wanted to ask her a question quickly, if that's appropriate.
Sure.
When you said that you're going to ask the harbor master to sign all 4, is this the current form?
That's the form that we use, and at the bottom,
Yeah,
where it's approved for signature, that's the intent, is to recommend to the harbor master that.
Yeah, that's not the form.
okay. So as I was able to attend your meeting, but personally had concerns of 2 of the 5 criteria. And I think you said your discussion covered those 2 points as well. Interfered with navigation and other uses in the area. So if the answer is no on 2 of those, is the harbor master still gonna sign off on the affirmative?
We only answered no to one of those.
Okay.
And that was the navigation hazard. The group did not feel that it rose to the extent for the other, or that we could not speak to it.
Right, so but if there is an objection from Coastal Waters to one of the ranking criteria, does that then mean the harbor master cannot sign off
No, that does
on
not.
it? So you can still endorse the application even though the group felt,
He can't answer no at all. This is just a recommendation, and we don't have control over it.
You probably want to carry this conversation forward
Yeah.
with Coastal Waters as opposed to here.
well, part of the process is raised at a discussion in the Board of Selectmen. So I am trying to clarify the process, and it does affect this board. All right, it's right there on the town questionnaire.
I think the question's answered, is it not? All right. And I think the consensus of the board was we don't intend to write a letter. Okay. All right. Thanks, Herb. Thanks, Paul. Moving on, planning board had some comments, I think. Many comments.
Am I okay to sit right here?
Sure.
Is
Yeah.
that all right?
As long as you're close to the owl.
The whole goal of this update is just to inform the select board what the planning board is doing, but also to seek the guidance and thoughts
on our ongoing and upcoming efforts. Please pardon me if I read this, but there's a lot of ground to cover. I don't want to forget anything. I don't want to do it as efficiently as I can. Please don't hesitate to stop me at any time if you have questions. Or to cut me off, prioritize the items so that the last couple can wait for another day if we start to get, if I talk too much. If I pinch for time. Number one, the planning board is very pleased that an interim code officer is on board. As we reflect on our history with the prior CEO. Our strong hope is that both interim and future permanent appointees will work closely and cooperatively with the planning board, recognizing that we're on the same team with the same goal. Number two, in your packet is the new revised, re-edited planning board ordinance. The biggest change is reducing board membership to 5. There are no other surprises, just a minor administrative edits. We plan to have this public hearing ready for the 2024 town meeting warrant for voter approval. Also in your packet is a comprehensive plan update, along with a summary of takeaways from that update. Excuse me. The purpose of the update was to, 1, revisit and affirm the original comprehensive plan's intent and direction. 2, to comply, even though it didn't have to, with the defunct state requirement to rewrite the plan every 10 years. Even though it's not required any longer, it's still a good idea to revisit, rethink, do a head check, see where we stand with that plan. Third purpose was to, out of the many goals in the comprehensive plan, too many to number, to cherry pick the highest priority goals from this plan. Note any goals that have been achieved so far, and then recategorize the 15 selected goals into 3 groups. And we kind of came up with groupings of necessary, character, and environment. And necessary, an example of that might be for sustainability purposes, maintain a top-notch school. Character might be to retain a 1.5 acre minimum lot size. And environment might be to protect the aquifer or to properly adjust how we operate to accommodate CO. The whole idea of the update was to revisit and do a head check, affirm the concepts and themes that the plan laid out, and summarize it in an easily accessible format for general use, but also to provide guidance to the planning board for zoning ordinance revision. More on that in a moment. We plan to have this update ready for the 2024 town meeting warrant to be approved as an appendix to the original comprehensive. Again, please stop me if you have any questions along the way. 4, after considerable discussion and back and forth, the planning board decided to do a short-term interim edit of the zoning ordinance with a long-run view to a total rewrite. The ordinance was viewed as too complex and substantial to get done in a timely enough fashion to address current district and permitted usage concerns and to incorporate the mandates of LD 203, which have to be incorporated by July 1st. These are both views requiring more immediate action. The current plan is to edit the zoning ordinance to address the districts, leaving them as they're mapped, but on residential and island business, but removing some of the distinctions that made no sense. And the goal is, on the one hand, to make the permitted uses lists more open, less restrictive, while on the other hand, protecting property owners by requiring either or Board of Appeals or Planning Board review, employing carefully structured, objective performance standards for any new proposed use. Zoning ordinance lot regulations and the section on conversions will need to be rewritten to incorporate LD 2013 mandates. Primarily, it's focused on density increases achieved by permitting accessory dwelling units on standard size, i.e. 1.5 acre lots. Further, the planning board will review both the zoning ordinance and the shoreline zoning ordinance to assure that they are consistent regarding districts, permitted uses, and density requirements. Obviously, much further work lies ahead to fully edit, rewrite these ordinances, but these short-term changes are both necessary and achievable in the bill. We plan to have these edits ready for, again, a public hearing and approval at the 2024 town meeting. Last two items, one, short-term rentals have cropped up as a nationwide concern in recent years. Concerns include, among others, that FDRs produce both market and affordable housing stock, can be responsible for increased noise, unruly parties, overcrowding, burdening public safety departments, uncertain personal security, increased litter, and lack of respect for local custom. Absentee landlords have been cited as unable or unwilling to manage the on-the-ground details of rental. In general, many municipalities across the country are wrestling with the prospect of SDR's potential and existing negative impacts on their neighborhoods. Our question is, should we have a short-term rental ordinance, which might include registration of short-term rentals, regulations, and or fees? Portland and Freeport, for example, have done so. Accountability and enhanced responsibility of the property owners would be the goal here, not necessarily prevention or reduction of short-term rentals. An ordinance would be a chance to head off any towards issues that might arise from increased numbers of SPRs. As per ADUs and LD 2003, we already have in our ordinance and actually in the legislation itself, the right of the municipality to regulate SPR with respect to implementation of LD 2003's mandate. So the implementation may mean that we could permit more ADUs or accessory dwellings on a property, but we could also regulate that to not permit them to be used for short-term rentals. So that is really a question that I would put to the board. Should we be considering a short-term rental ordinance?
Mark?
Talking about mostly Airbnb rental.
Essentially, yeah.
Yeah. But I think it would be smart to take a whack at it themselves and draft up something. I think what we don't want to do, in my opinion, as a community, is make it difficult for people to rent their property for a period of time that either assists them with tax payment, upkeep of property, and, maintaining the property overall. If they choose to or need to rent it, I don't think we want to deter that or make it difficult to do that. But I think it's probably smart of us to take a glance as a community at the Airbnb situation before it starts to increase. And possibly have some reasonable or consider some reasonable guidelines and I hate to say it, restrictions. That's my opinion.
Yeah.
I've never thought of this before. I'd like more research before I could weigh in on that. Think about it a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's probably a good idea, but I think the way to approach it might be to have a workshop in the community. I don't think it's necessarily up to the select board. I would kind of get the community to weigh in on that. Because it does affect a lot of property owners more than a year-round property, especially. So there also is money available. So GP Cog has, I think, are you aware they have people available to help with the LD 2003. And then also looking for short-term rental. So I do think the ADU law kind of drives us to having a short-term rental ordinance.
Yeah, I think if I can.
Sure, but
To get the money from LD, for LD 2003 expenses, you have to have expenses to submit. As I understand it, when I read it, you can't do it. Where if you do, if spend and don't spend, you have to give it back anyway. Most of the changes I see that we need to do, because we don't have growth districts, and we're not doing affordable housing through LD 2003. You know, in other words, putting 4 units on a lot. I think it's a real, unless I'm really crazy, I think it's a very simple fix. And I don't think it's gonna cost us anything, but I'm aware of the monies available. And likewise on the concept of short-term rentals, I don't think we're going to write an ordinance tomorrow and put it out there. I think if anything, we go through the public first and make sure everybody's all on the same page and that people recognize it as something that either does or doesn't need to be done. But I did want the selectmen's opinion.
I have just a different twist for you guys to consider as you look at it. Starting with the comprehensive plan, which inherently includes contradictions. We want to facilitate growth. We want to maintain character. Those are going to conflict with each other at times, for example. But character and the character of this place 10 years ago when the comp plan was written refers back to the character even before then. We've always had short-term rentals here. In the past, they were made available, made public by way of a list on the library that you could get via mail before the web existed. There was a list, I think at times on Beverly's website, and then technology changed. So my point is that with technology changing, we've seen a dramatic increase in the number of short-term rentals. In my opinion, I don't have facts to back that up. With the increased ease of building ADUs, I would suspect we will see more interest in building an ADU to enhance one's property, but then helping to pay for it by renting it out. So I would encourage those public discussions to include that concept of how many rentals per year over time, and do we need to consider those changes that could be driving more rentals over time, and what impacts those increased rentals might have on the boat, the bus, parking, water, sewage, etc.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Thank you for that. Any comments or questions from the public on John's presentation? Oh, sorry.
But
Go ahead, Pam.
questions are good.
It's, question is for John. At the last town meeting, there was, an ordinance change that we actually had voted on previously when we voted in, but there was some administrative snafu, and this is related to the setback from the high tide mark, moving it, I think, from 75 to 150, or ringing a bell?
As I recall, there was consideration of vegetation removal beyond the 75 feet, more in the shoreline zone itself, which is 200 feet, right? It's like 200, 250.
250.
And it was a change just to make sure that people talked to the CEO and got a permit, just to make sure they're
Yeah.
removing the right stuff.
Yeah, so I'm feeling some urgency on that one. I'm seeing a lot of clearing. And it may actually be legal clearing right now, but with that ordinance, it wouldn't be.
Okay. I mean, I guess that's an issue for the code officer, is that correct?
Well, I guess I'm not.
And if you're seeing things you are not sure if they're permitted.
I'm sure they wouldn't be.
So Pam, is your question about an ordinance that was passed at the last town meeting,
2 town meetings ago.
2 town meetings ago?
An administrative snafu. And it was voted down at the last town meeting for wording. Can
Go ahead, Vika.
So there, at the last town meeting in June, there were 3 ordinances that were in front of the town. There were 2 ordinances that had been previously voted on, that did not go through the proper administrative steps. So there was a legal recommendation to do it right. No changes were done. Those 2 ordinances passed.
Right.
The ordinance that did not pass was the ordinance that was brought by the planning board. And I can. You give me a
That was the
minute.
planning board ordinance, was it not?
That was the only one that you did.
That's the only one that didn't pass.
The one that you're working on right now. Yeah.
Reworking
Yeah.
now, yeah.
So,
But that planning board ordinance didn't have anything to do with the shorefront issues relative to tree trimming and such. The planning board ordinance simply outlines the work of the planning board, how the team is made up, that kind of thing.
So, I'd like to follow up. Do I follow up with the board or do I follow up with John?
Well, I'd like for us to focus on John's presentation. This seems like a different topic. So if there's an item relative to clearing in the shorefront, I'd like to not take that up now.
And my point is I would like to see the ordinance changed on that so that people have to go to the code enforcement officer and get a
Right.
permit.
And this would not be the time to talk about that. If you want to suggest that, please attend a planning board meeting or engage in correspondence with the chair of the planning board, but we don't want to do that now.
that's a different ordinance.
It's a different ordinance and it's not part of tonight's conversation.
Yeah, what I'm asking is
Give
if
me-
you put some urgency on
Yeah,
that.
give me a.
Thanks.
That'd be great. Thank you very much. Okay.
And
And
one
the
more
things
item,
that,
maybe
yep,
4 or 5 minutes.
Yep.
something like that.
go for it.
Last but not least, Cumberland's old subdivision ordinance that we adopted has never really fit to be. Rewriting necessary. Current planning board thinking is to streamline to one category of subdivision. Follows the state definition of dividing property into 3 or more lots within a 5-year period. That would be a subdivision. It's already in the current zoning ordinance. Planning board is authorized to require that any subdivision might be a cluster development. It would not be a huge stretch to rewrite the subdivision ordinance to incorporate this open space cluster requirement, while also making certain it complied with the dictates of LD 2003. By my not so quick and dirty review of the tax commitments, I did go line by line. It was great fun. There are over 70 properties that are divisible into 3+ lots, some considerably more. Such a rewrite might have a substantial long-run impact on the island's character and ambience. Should the planning, my question to the board is, should the planning board look into pursue such an ordinance rewrite?
Anybody? Carol?
I just have a question. Are you saying requiring any subdivision to be a cluster subdivision? Is that what you just said?
We could leave the wording the same way as it is already in section 405 of the zoning ordinance that talks about cluster development. That says that basically the planning board is authorized to require that a development be set up as a cluster development or a traditional development, depending on not a long list, but a substantial list of criteria they can consider. It basically would be essentially codifying what's in the zoning ordinance in the subdivision ordinance.
So are you saying that you would only permit a cluster development? Is that what you're saying?
I would probably leave it just like it is in the zoning ordinance where they can require either a cluster or a traditional development based on, carefully looking at the criteria that are listed in that section of the ordinance.
Yeah, I don't recall that they, I mean, maybe I don't remember, but I don't recall that they could require either one. But
I was somewhat shocked.
well, and so I'm not sure I would agree with that. So I guess the whole question of the nature of the development, I wouldn't want, just my gut reaction is I wouldn't want to require cluster development only. But I guess that would go with the public hearing process.
Absolutely. And again, I like the wording as it stands in there now. It authorized to require one or the other, depending on criteria, depending on the nature of the land, depending on proximity to agriculture, shoreline, wildlife, habitat.
Didn't we have cluster development to that?
Cluster development has been part of the ordinances that we adopted from Cumberland,
So,
yes.
yes, I'm a little, because I don't want to spend any time on.
Yeah.
I think revisiting the subdivision ordinance is a good idea.
Good idea.
And I would take a slightly different tack. I would encourage us to consider requiring that any subdivision over 5 or some small number, any subdivision of land be a conservation subdivision, which is a variation on a cluster subdivision. Some of our neighboring towns do require that now. It simply says that instead of taking 7.5 acres and dividing it into 5 lots of 1.5 acres each, 5 building sites of 1.5 acres each, you take that same 7.5 acres, but you make the building sites 1 acre each, and the extra land that's created then becomes some sort of open space, ideally in the form of a buffer. I think that approach is consistent with the comprehensive plan. Not our call, though, as Carol pointed out with the other conversation. Great topic for conversation at a public workshop as you guys consider this, but I would applaud you for considering it. I think it's a good thing to look at. How do we go further implementing the comprehensive plan aspirations into our actual zoning ordinances? Anybody else?
Not that subject, but would you mind if I ask a question that has to do with page 1 and 2?
Go for it.
Makeup of the recommendation for the makeup of the planning board is going from 7 to 5. A quorum is 3 is what your recommendation is. Here's my scenario question. I always love to use scenario question. If you have 3 members present at a meeting and the vote is 2 to 1, does that pass? And then the reason I ask that
That's a good question.
is that the select board specifically has that in our ordinance, that if only 3 of us show up, and it's a 2 to 1 vote, that does not pass. And I'm just asking that out of curiosity, not out of criticism. You have an opinion on that?
I'll respond by saying I don't know. I honestly don't know. Technically, legally, what would be the.
I'm not sure. I just
It'd
think.
be a good question for Maine Municipal.
I
If
think
it's
that
not
would be-
called out in the
I think it
ordinance.
Probably deserves a little bit of thought,
Yep.
if this is the recommendation.
It is, yeah. Carol, did you have something?
Thank you.
Well, I think it's a good policy.
A good policy too.
If it's 2 to 1, I think because that is how we.
It's our fault. It doesn't
That's
mean
our-
that's
Well,
what
it's not our policy, it's in our ordinance.
Yeah, it's a requirement.
I'm sorry, it's in the ordinance.
It's in the ordinance.
That's
And
right.
I recommend that for the planning board, because you're quasi municipal, it's not, you know, that's my opinion.
Yeah, but it would be a good conversation for the attorneys at Maine Municipal. John, you have access to them. You can ask them that question. And then if you want to propose codifying it, that could be included in this ordinance revision that then town meeting would vote on, if you wanted to actually put it into the ordinance.
Yeah, I think even the old ordinance where we were 7, when we're working on it now, 7 with a 4, quarter of 4.
Yep.
Again, with a 3 to 1 vote there.
It's an open question. Yeah,
It's not specified in the ordinance.
right.
That's a great one.
Yeah, I don't know if it matters, but I think we should probably
Would
be clear on it.
And the
legally.
board and the select board currently You still have to have, if it's 2-1 vote, that does not.
Doesn't pass, right?
So you have to have three positive votes.
As dictated by language in our actual
In the
ordinance. Yes.
And just out of curiosity, would the select board like to see that? Like to see the planning board, if we went to 5, operate the same way?
I think Carol said she thought that was a
Yeah.
good idea. I don't think the select board is taking an official position on that. It sounds like something worth exploring and then ultimately letting town meeting decide.
We'll do, may require.
And in a workshop, it'd be a really good conversation to talk about the ins and outs of that and the scenarios as Mark described and that kind of thing. Just one further piece of information for everybody. The reason for going from 7 to 5 is based on the fact that 7 is required for a certain size town. We are not that size town. When we copied the ordinance over from Cumberland, it said 7, so we stuck with 7. When we realized, when we looked at the actual MRSA's regarding size of planning board, we realized the appropriate size for our town is 5. Somebody did, I don't know who did that, but anyway. Ready, John?
That's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, appreciate it.
John, can I have a copy of that from, will you email me a copy of that for my minutes?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Any other public comments relative to what John just shared with us? All right, thank you. Moving on into regular business, item 23.090, discuss the town administrator position and take any necessary action. A great opportunity to say thank you to Vika and the town staff for coming together and figuring out how to continue to take care of the town business in this transition period ahead of us. Vika has offered to stay on for up to the duration of her original contract and has worked hard, as has Chris, to talk to friends and get other help in, including the people that Vika mentioned earlier. So as Vika mentioned, Kathy's in for a day a week. Hannah reached out to us. Hannah Hatfield reached out to us, and that's gone really well. General, and so thanks to you guys for that. General status of the interview process. We have received, I'm going to say, 7 resumes for the town administrator position, 3 of which appear to have some relationship to the job, a couple of which appear to have a lot of relationship to the job. 2 of whom we've interviewed now, and we're trying to set up an interview with the 3rd one. There's an interview team who conducts the interviews with a certain process and using the same list of questions for each interview. And that team will then make recommendations to the select board, who will, I would imagine, I'd like to hear from the select board on this, but I would imagine the select board would then conduct the 2nd interview with any candidate that the interview team says is someone to take a look at. Any comments from the select board on that process or on that concept of the select board doing the 2nd interview? Mark?
I'm not speaking for the members that aren't on the interview team, because I am on there with Bob Ernest and Jeff Putnam and Ralph Monroe.
Yeah.
But I would suggest that if we bring back a recommendation to this body, I would suggest that we consider bringing the individual for an in-person meeting and discussion with this body at the very least.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
Okay, Carol.
And I guess I'm thinking that it might not be a bad idea to have 2 candidates, the top 2 candidates, rather than limit it, say to 1, only because, you know, we could go through the whole process and find out they've gone somewhere else. So I would recommend a couple.
Yeah. The one monkey wrench I would throw into that conversation is that one candidate that the group liked a lot after the first interview, who then all the reference checks were quite positive, left a few days after we interviewed them for a 4-week vacation. So the in-person piece would not be available until Veterans Day, which is a ways out there. I did check with him. He would be interested in a Zoom meeting for the 2nd interview with the select board, if the select board was interested in that. That person has already visited the island, and the first interview by the interview team was done in person in this room. But we can talk about that as it evolves, I would suggest. Any other comments? Comments from the public on that topic? Okay. Thanks, everybody. Thanks. Item 23-091, to elect a select board chair and a select board vice chair for the balance of the fiscal year. The ordinance, the select board ordinance stipulates that in the absence of the select board chair, that the vice chair steps up. It doesn't go much more in detail than that. And I think it's the consensus of the board that it would be good to have an election. So I would, Mark.
I'd like to make a motion to nominate Bob Ernest as chair of the select board.
Okay. All right, nomination by Mark, second by Josh. This is the first time I've done an election. Do we vote on that, or we don't ask for other candidates? We vote on that one, yes or no?
Ask if there are any other
Okay.
nominations.
Are there any other nominations? All right, all in favor of Bob Ernest? I will abstain. That's 3, yes. Okay, nominations for vice chair.
Nominate Mark for position of vice chair.
Second by Josh, nomination by Carol. Are there other nominations? All in favor of Mark? 4-0. All right, thank you. Okay. Item 23-092, to discuss a new select board meeting time and format and take any necessary action. Meeting times are always a tough thing, especially in winter. Everybody likes to go to bed early. I certainly like to be in bed earlier than I will be tonight. But we also have work schedules, and we have members of the select board who don't get home on some meeting nights. So we've unofficially decided to start tonight's meeting at 7 o'clock, and we wanted to have a discussion tonight about making that the permanent process. I would suggest that we also consider a hard stop at 9 p.m. It would be the responsibility of the TA and the chair to structure agendas such that they have a good chance of ending by then. But unless there's some sort of burning emergency, to stop at 9 p.m. and adjourn the meeting, just in the interest of civility. And to help accomplish that goal, I would also suggest that we consider, if at all possible, limiting public comment to 3 minutes per comment, 3 minutes per individual. So that's a suggestion as an agenda item. Any discussion from the board, Mark?
I'd like to make a motion to have a start time of the select board, Township Big Select Board meeting be 7 p.m. for the remainder of this fiscal year at least.
Is there a second? Second by Carol. Discussion? All in favor? All right, thank you. Item 20, I should have asked for public comment. Sorry. Is there any public comment on? Okay, thanks. 23-093, to review the suggested 2024-2025 budget schedule and take any necessary action. The budget schedule was in the packet. Any questions from the board, Carol?
I kind of feel like, at least I've only done this once, but it seems like a dam starting in January. I would recommend we try to start earlier, at least in terms of discussing our priorities. That's
Okay.
my preference. I don't know what you think. It seems like we barely make it to the finish line without.
I think that it wouldn't be out of question to, in a regular budget meeting, to start and just have an agenda item of a discussion of what your priorities going into the next budget season is. So when you come to this, you kind of have it all lined up, so you're not starting. But, you know, that than backpedaling, because that seems to be what kind of took place last year a little bit.
Any other thoughts? Mark?
I also think that we've been starting the budget season too late, and probably, you know, if we can end up forming a formal budget committee at some point, we can overcome some of the, but I think we got bogged down on the operational departmental budgets. I don't think that that's not to minimize the operating budget or the department budget, but I think where the rubber is going to hit the road with this community is capital improvement budgets. And I think the capital budget, especially looking at the good suggestion in the comprehensive plan of coming up with a 5-year capital plan, is really where hopefully if we can form a formal budget committee, focus should be. Not that we shouldn't pay attention to the operating budget and the departments and let them, you know, go up. But I think, and having taken part in this and running a lot of these meetings, we've definitely gotten bogged down with wasting time on, you know, $500 here, $1,500 there, and so on and so forth. So I think that we need to give this a bit more thought, see if we can come back with a recommendation to form at least a ad hoc committee to start forming a recommendation for a budget committee, which may be appointed, may be elected. I don't know if it moves forward. But I think we can probably tighten this up and start a little earlier, at least in December, if not November. Sure.
And I think towards the end of the budget process, we should have a public, I don't know if it's a public forum or an informational mailing to the community, but a better way to communicate the goals, the changes, sort of like a lot of towns do, before town meeting, because just sending out the warrant articles to me is not sufficient. And there were a lot of questions at the last town meeting that could have been answered ahead of time. And I don't really, you know, I don't think town meeting is the place to kind of ask those questions, because or there should be another way to get that information prior to that. And I don't know whether it's just posting something online, whether it's mailing something out or having a meeting. The meeting part doesn't seem, you know, the school had one the prior year, no one showed up. So they didn't do it last year. So there might be a different format, but I think we should build in some kind of public information about the budget. For example, last year we spent some time trying to calculate, you know, expected mill rate. And I think that would be good information for people. What areas of the budget have gone up, what have gone down, what's the cost of living increase, those kind of things. Insurance increases, just so people know what's happening.
So a question, like Carol, I was new at this past year. Josh is brand new at it. Mark, you're the old hand. So a question for Vika and Mark and Chris. What information do we need in front of us in order to have a meaningful discussion of budget goals and priorities? At what point in time do we have that information available to us?
I think that's for you as a board to decide what would be helpful for that discussion. Typically, I mean, this is only the third time that I've done this, but haven't seen other town administrators in the office do it. From the office perspective, the sheet that you see with all of the pages, all the different departments in the previous 3 years and the recommended amount, that's kind of what is the starting discussion.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I had done and what other town administrators had done is for a recommended amount at that very early stage, just have a draft, a very early stages of a recommendation, and you kind of look at that, and then go off of that, but if there are specific goals that the board has, I think that's maybe where it would be efficient to start a discussion. You know, first week in December about what are the board's goals, so then it allows the town administrator to provide that information in those documents, so it's a little bit more aligned when those documents come forward with you. Because one of the disconnects that I've noticed is, in my experience, I've taken that document from the previous year and kind of the trajectory of what has happened and put that information in and brought it to the board, but the board had different goals or thoughts or ideas. And then last year in particular, I noticed that there was a disconnect. So it instantly started out kind of a step back. So if the board has a better idea of what their goals are, and those are better directed to the town administrator prior to that first draft, I think that could make everything more efficient in the starting process and maybe avoid those initial questions of like Mark said, you know, a couple dollars here, a couple dollars there with the budget here, or with the department bogged down as you're referencing it, so.
Thank you. Carol.
And then on this budget schedule, we don't connect with the school committee until pretty late in the process. Is that the way it's been?
That's the way it's been, yes.
And that works okay?
I think that once again, it's a question for the board of whether it works for this board or not.
Yeah, this is just a guide from years past. If you want to mock it up, I'd be happy to retype that for you.
But I thought there were 2 meetings. When I was on the school committee, didn't we have 2 meetings? With the board, an early meeting, sort of.
They took that out.
Right.
The school took that out.
The school committee took it out.
Yep.
Because I think the school board was just unprepared in the early stages to provide an in-depth information to put into the town. And I think that's the challenge that this town has that some other towns don't, is kind of the line, you know, in sync budgets that then come under the one town warrant with 2 different departments. And so I think that's definitely room for improvement for both boards to communicate. I mean, I don't think it would be a terrible idea for one board to attend, you know, a budget meeting for one board and vice versa, just so it's a less formal discussion where you just go and you can see what they're talking about. So then when you come into the discussion, you have a little bit of better idea of what they had done.
It's a good idea.
Okay.
Mark.
Very quickly, and I think Vika might agree with what I'm going to say, and I think at least Herb might agree with what I'm going to say. There's a capital planning document that we really haven't gotten back to, and we sort of slightly abandoned. I don't think it was intentional or malicious on our part, but I think that's probably something that we should really get back to and start trying to use for capital improvement planning, prioritization of what's next. Is it the fire safety, public safety building? Is it stone wharf? What is it? And you know, so on and so forth. How are we projecting to go after funding locally, and what would the time frame be for target for that? You know, we really should get more specific with those type of projects and try to have goals in mind so that the community is well aware of the list and either on board with it or not, and hearing what people say, and then figuring out how it's going to affect our budget and our tax rate.
And if we could integrate into that, the bond schedule as well, that would also be, I think, valuable information for the public. Carol.
We're maybe gonna talk about it on the next agenda item, but that's something I think could be a priority for now on this.
Yes, yeah.
It's a capital.
So let's,
Maybe one
Yeah.
quick, so in this discussion, talking about the capital plan and referencing, I think Herb was the creator of kind of that packet Having worked in that town office for 6 years prior to stepping in the TA position, I didn't even know that that packet existed. So I think that that's an important thing to keep in mind going into the search process of a new town administrator. If that is a priority for you to have done on an annual basis, that's really something that should be very strongly presented in front, because if I had been there for 6 years and I didn't know that that was there, I was backpedaling to try to update 3 years worth of it, because, the person before me never did it, and so that's just kind of, just something to keep in mind, because that could be helpful and starting out on a positive note rather than being behind a couple of years.
All right, thanks. So let's try to wrap this item up and then shift into the next one, which we've kind of already started with, which is the ad hoc committee or whatever it's going to be. Sounds like there's a lot of energy for moving the discussion of budget goals and priorities up. I think, maybe I'm conflating this with the earlier conversation. Did somebody talk about a public workshop with that, or is that? No, okay. So sounds like we should put discussion of budget goals and priorities maybe even into November. That was Mark's suggestion, I think, was Carol said December, Mark said December or November.
Yeah, maybe December, we can talk about that.
Okay, so let's try to move that up to earlier, and let's just for now say first meeting in December.
It's December 6th. So that would give you 2 meetings in December to be able to talk about priorities.
Yeah.
So,
All right. Okay, and then there's some other ideas in there. Does somebody want to volunteer to have a chat with the school committee or the chair of the school committee? Carol? Okay, so Carol will have a chat to just see what their priorities are, see what they think about when we talk, how often we talk, how we're involved with each other's budget process, things like that.
Yep.
Okay, and report back maybe at the next meeting with that?
Yep.
Great. So if we could add that to the agenda items for next meeting, that would be great. Anything else out of this discussion, or good for now? All right, comments from the public on that item? Pam.
So an observation from having sat through the budget process last year, it was very hard to discern what the strategic priorities were. And usually with a budget of that nature, you would have 5, 6, maybe 7 strategic priorities that were right alongside of the budget. So capital budgeting, it would be done according to those priorities. With maintenance, it would also be done according to those priorities. And those 5 or 6 being identified from the strategic plan, and typically they would come out of what the long-term plan is. I think that would be a worthwhile agenda item for the board, and it would really change the budget process.
Thank you. And her hand up.
I just wanted to sort of summarize what you said in the context of the question you presented, which was, what do we need to have in hand to establish our goals? And everything that everybody has said here sort of relates to that. The discussion of goals has always been an argument for the board. I'm not sure why exactly, but partly because it's hasn't had structure, probably because it's, well, what are our goals? That's the question. But I think you need to break it down to just the things that everybody's talked about tonight in terms of what major projects do you want to accomplish in the next fiscal year? What parts of the capital plan, to Pam's point, what parts of the capital plans are a priority for you to execute, and do you have the funds to do it? So having a capital plan in some form before you try to set those goals would be the optimal thing, so that you can choose those, underscore those, set one aside as a goal. I think understanding the funding mechanisms of the town. We probably, if we've raised a lot of grant money, it's because of individual efforts, and we have done some of that. but we haven't done it as a town. We haven't done it in a structured way to say this is part of the funding mechanism for our priorities, for our goals. So setting those as goals, we need to raise some money this way. So understanding what the available pots of money are for setting your goals. We want to go after this pot of money, we go after that pot of money, just to some degree, it's high level, I understand. But having some idea of what's out there for those things, understanding what your undesignated fund balance is at that point. Is that going to be something we can use? What is the goal for that? And of course, you have to wrap in, as you've already mentioned, the school stuff.
Yep. So,
I haven't said anything new here, I just sort of wrapped it up, and I think that discussion goal needs to be more structured, is my point.
Yep. Thank you. Other comments? All right, continuing the conversation by moving on to item 23-094. To discuss and take any necessary action regarding the establishments of a finance committee, a finance ad hoc committee, a finance task force. Lots of names thrown around. Different names might have different implications for how people are chosen or volunteer to take part, all that kind of thing. This has been talked about for a long time as a way to streamline the budget process and to make the budget process more effective and more complete. And the purpose of having it on the agenda tonight was to try to figure out what that really means and what we need to do to get things started and what are the goals of such a committee. So with that, I'll open it up to the board for comments. Mark?
Yeah, so I'm one of those that's personally late bringing this to the board because I asked her if she would help me consider bringing something to this board, and we just haven't been able to meet. We finally had a very informative chat night before last night, excuse me. And so I would be willing to, I think what we simply should do is ask, a couple, 3 people at the most to go and write something up, bring it back to this body for a recommendation, for a starting point for a finance group, finance committee. In other words, just have a couple of people, maybe 3, draft up something that shows the name of the committee, number of members, terms, tasks, duties, and maybe even some recommendations of relationship to the select board and or the school board, something like that. That's my recommendation.
Do you think something like that could be brought back to the next meeting for discussion?
I do.
Carol?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we're sort of on the same page there. I think what I would suggest, and I think it's partly based on this discussion with her, is that we set up an ad hoc committee that would go for the remainder of this fiscal year. And that, we sort of give them some specific tasks, and one of them being to come up with what the long-term, structure of some kind of finance committee might be for the town. But beyond that, I think they could also do at least a rough assessment of kind of the budget over time, just to see how, where our spending has increased and not, just kind of a high level look at the budget from when we started as a town and what it is now. And in terms of the different departments, the school spending, and even, debt service, because I'm not clear on, personally where we are from when we started. And then I think the capital plan is the other place that an ad hoc finance group could get started on, because the plan that her put together, the selectmen put together, needs to be updated and maybe simplified. But I don't think it would take more than, I think it could be done in that time frame. So to me, it would be to set out those particular tasks on the short term for this ad hoc committee, who ultimately, working with the select board through the budget process, could then come up with a recommendation for sort of a permanent structure for finance. That's how I see it.
Anything?
Yeah, I have not been through this yet, so I really am not someone to really speak to any of this. But it seems when I take in people's comments, that there's not enough time to really get a good budget and get things going, so I think. You know, having a committee that could spend more time really focusing on the information or looking through the schedule, it's just. How are we gonna get enough done? I just don't see it happening, just us to have a good budget, so. I think having a task force or putting something together, people that really know finance and have an interest in doing it is just important and can really help the town, so I support.
Could I have permission to ask Carol a question? Were you done?
I'm done.
Carol, do you have an inclination of how many people you think should be on this initial task force group?
I was thinking something like 3. I mean, just, I know a regular finance committee might be larger in some communities, but I think something like 3 people. And I think, you know, the way to approach it would be at the next select board meeting, have kind of what, you know, the task that we would like them to accomplish, kind of number of people. And, you know, kind of clear expectations. So that, and I don't know whether we're thinking of appointing these people or just, you know, accepting applications, I don't know. That would be the other thing to decide.
Yeah, that was my follow-up question. Do we feel like we would advertise this for applications for people that might be interested in finance, budgeting?
I think if you're as a board creating a committee, I think you would need to advertise for it just to, for the sake of transparency, to not make it seem like there's something completely different about this as a, you know, volunteer committee versus other ones.
Yeah, I think it's different for a standing committee than it is for an ad hoc committee, but I don't have any preference, strong preference one way or the other. How about, Mark, are you willing to take a stab at this for the next meeting? And is Herb, am I hearing that Herb's willing to take a stab at this?
No, you didn't hear that.
Okay. I've heard other people say, I heard your name mentioned a lot.
You did? Yeah, your list up like I like it.
Mark and I will take a stab at it as select board members. I think we can come up with a one page.
Perfect.
Want to do that?
Yeah.
And that would include how members are going to be on the board.
And I think that's a reasonable suggestion that Vika has. I think,
Mhm.
especially being finance, we don't want
Yeah.
it to appear like we only have conservative finance people on there or something.
Yeah, I agree quickly. I think Vika's comment's a good one. I think advertising for opportunity shows that we're trying to,
Mhm.
you know, be consistent first of all, but second of all, shows that we're not trying to stack the committee with certain individuals.
Yep. Yeah. Knowing that any recommendations the finance committee would make would then come to the board, who's going to talk about them and say yes, say no, change a few things. And then knowing that town meeting also weighs in, but yeah, all that. Okay, so that'll be on the agenda for the next meeting for a report out from Mark and Carol. And thank you for doing that. That's great.
So Bob, before we read that, what I would suggest to do is we come up with a draft, circulate it to the board, kind of come up with a final draft, put that in the packet.
Yep,
Does that make sense?
that makes sense. Yep. All right. Other business, the facilities committee has a representative here, the chair of the facilities committee, I think. Did you have a quick report out on it? Were you? Yeah, well. Yes, surprise.
Bob was at our meeting last week, and so with my board, the Rogers, and I think do I need to come up there?
Oh, sorry, yes.
May I sit like?
You may, yes. We should have a throne there, not just a regular chair, yes.
I think you all, agreed with the fact that we needed to have some expertise with an architect and an engineer to look over this site where there's three parties with needs. So the next order of business was for a draft to come up with the RFP. And we do have one, which, David Bruner, being an architect, helped put this together, and I'm assuming you have passed it on to the Board of Select.
I think I did. Did I email that?
I don't think so.
Okay, I did not.
So what has to happen next, which would be probably in your next meeting, so we could get going on this, would be for you to accept it and put it on letterhead
Oh.
and send it to Port City, who will then put some effort into it to help all parties concerned. And they first need to give you a quote on what this is going to cost. So that's really all that I can think of that you need to know, but there is some concern about getting this all in order so it can be done in the spring for all parties.
Right.
And yes,
So I just want to understand, are you thinking, I guess what I thought we were doing was having Port City do this, is that correct?
yeah,
So we're just gonna get a quote, we're just asking them for a quote.
yes, and
Yeah, okay,
and we were able to have somebody with some expertise take all the needs and put it into a RFP to them.
yeah. all right, that's-
So everything seems to be in order, and with that, I think the only other thing to report to you is the need, when it gets to an approval state, and it seems okay in all parties, that we need to have a contract. And instead of it piggybacking onto the facilities committee, I think it should be separate, because we have broadband and the town and the fire department with the radio tower. So that was a question that Curtis asked, do you want it piggybacked onto our contract, or do you want a separate contract? And that would be the thing that I would recommend to you all, is to have a separate contract.
A contract between.
The contract that they go ahead and do the work for the three parties. And it would be separate, because we already have a contract with the facilities committee for the town office and so forth.
This would be a contract with Port City?
Yes.
Okay. So, Beacon.
Can I just maybe clarify? So I think what Beth is saying is that when Port City, when the facilities committee was tasked with a specific, guidance of what they needed to do, that followed with a RFQ and then contract with Port City for specifically looking at the different facilities. This has created a different direction of looking at not only that facility, but others. And so I think that the logical thing would be to not piggyback it on the facilities and have it be a separate thing that Port City has a new contract with the details of what the work was going to be done, but then someone will have to oversee it.
It's because it's not just the facilities that we're doing, it's because we have the entity now of broadband and their needs. And so.
So, go ahead, Josh.
No, I was thinking before keeping it all separate, I thought better, but is that what you're saying, is to have the communications tower be separate?
No,
No.
having this project of broadband and power part of the town's needs, and then we have We have Yarmouth and Cumberland's needs coming in, so it's now moving in a different direction.
It would be a
And
separate contract with Port City, so the facilities, the town of Shipping Island has a contract with Port City right now about helping the town provide essentially a drawing of what the work needs to be done at the current fire department building, and then providing a drawing for a new fire department building. That was the initial contract.
Okay.
This, my understanding is the facilities committee is recommending that you're basically looking at it, take away the fact that it's Port City, you're having a firm that's gonna be looking at the overall picture of 3 projects coming together on one location. And not to cloud it by piggybacking it on the existing $30,000 contract that the town already has. And just kind of, so Port City would have 2 different things going with the town of Chebec.
Correct. Yeah.
And keeping it separate. I think that would make things a lot less confusing with the work that was already done
And
the costs.
And the cost,
And where
because
they
you
come from.
also, in the discussion, I think, Carol, you suggested it, in this RFP, which you will all get to see, is that, to make the determination of who's paying for what. So, all stakeholders will
Right.
need to see that, like, I'm assuming that Michael, the person for broadband, has he seen this?
So there are, yeah.
Yeah. So everybody's on the same page and everybody signs off when they come back, once you have secured their work, that you want them to do it, not secured their work, but that you hire them, that they can come back with all this outlined. And what we hope to do is, once that's going, is to not only have people from all parties go view the site, if there's any concerns from, we've got Mark and you, Bob, on that committee, Michael's on the broadband, in the towns of Yarmouth and Cumberland have been notified. I assume you sent that to them as
Yeah.
well.
No, here's why. I thought that the broadband committee was going to send out an RFP, and what this group would then look at was the proposal that was a response to the RFP from Port City. I don't see the value of this committee looking at the
You
RFP.
sent this because it's the only way I saw it. You sent this to Bill Jane and
I sent the,
only for review.
correct, only for
You're
review,
just keeping everybody
In the loop.
Is
but
there
this
any-
group, I thought said, please go ahead and send out the RFP to Port City. Am I wrong in that? Or did we ask facilities to bring back an
Under the
RFP?
assumption-
My point is, I don't see the need for us to review an RFP, but Carol, go ahead.
An RFP typically would be a proposal coming from multiple entities.
Correct.
That's why I'm a little confused. And I guess what I had assumed we were gonna do is get a quote from Port City.
Right.
For this additional work. So it's a little bit different. I'm not sure why I haven't seen this, so I don't know what it is, but I think outlining the scope of services that we're looking for with Port City is important. I guess, and if the facilities committee, maybe we need to think about, to me, it's all one facility. It's a town facility. I get where you're coming from. You have a specific project you've been working on, and that's a separate thing, but in general, it's all one facility. I guess one question I have is, what's the relationship with the town of Cumberland and the town of Yarmouth right now? Do they know we're doing this, or where are they at?
Yes.
They do, and if you could get this so you can look at it, all it is making you comfortable with our scope of work of what we're going to ask these people to do, because this came all under kind of a fiery moment, if you remember, in that meeting of who's doing what, and not to go back, but I guess, go back. We ended up, it all started because broadband wanted to go in and put their slab down. And they didn't know that we also had Yarmouth and Cumberland wanting to add on the tower and use that. So please just look at this and then know that if it goes to the next phase, then you will be the people that approve the quote.
Well, the thing that we need to think ahead about is where the money would come from for this work. So. And so that's what we need to consider. So say they give us a $20,000 quote, how are we gonna pay for it? And so that's, that's what, right?
The decision at the last meeting was to see the quote first and then figure out where the money was coming from. Whether part of it came from Cumberland and Yarmouth, whether part of it came from broadband, whatever the proposal that came back, which is going to tell us, for example, what we need to do with the generator. The nature of the proposal will help inform where the money should come
I
from.
guess I really haven't seen it. I kind of feel like I don't know what happened. But at any rate,
I'm referring to what we talked about in our last meeting. What we talked about was, I thought you guys were going to send the request specification, whatever we want to call it, out to Port City. And when the quote came back, when we saw it, then we would decide how to pay for it. But the benefit of having everybody in the room and having Cumberland and Yarmouth get copied on it was so that everybody knew what was going on.
So if you don't need to see this RFP, which is the scope of work, then we just go ahead and.
That was my expectation, yes.
So are you going to do that? It needs to have the town letterhead put on it and,
So you send me the information, I'll put it on letterhead and I'll email it to Curtis and Port City tomorrow.
That'd be great.
and I
then when,
apologize if there's any confusion, but it's just, if I thought you wanted them to see the RFP.
when after they receive that, they'll provide probably a multi-page scope of work with an outline of what the costs would, and then at that point, it'll be brought to the board.
And cost, if I may say, is the dividing of, we have money in there for an upgrade of 400 amp service, which is a problem. Broadband needs this. The towers for the young Cumberland and Yarmouth work, they have money. So in that meeting we had, it was discussed that, there'd be a breakout that Port City in their proposal would be saying this probably goes to broadband, this probably will work in here, and this should be the station, the 8x10 building will be for the fire departments of Cumberland and Yarmouth because of their need for this, so.
Right, so one thing, just to clarify, the letter from David Bruner says, and it went to everybody on the committee with a copy to Michael. Please find attached the draft RFP. We'll discuss it tomorrow night. Please bring any comments and we'll discuss at the meeting before sending off to Curtis. So that's why I wasn't thinking we needed to share it with this board based that and on our last conversation.
I apologize because I didn't get that because of so.
Oh, gotcha.
And so I've had a conversation with David about that. Too,
Okay.
So. Sorry to.
So Carol,
and I just want to make sure I understand, this is for services to provide like a site plan. And is that right? It's not, and beyond that, it's really just a simple site plan.
it's to prepare a proposal to initiate our newest site planning project. A proposal to initiate our newest site planning project. That's Dave's language to the committee. And it's going to Port City Architects and they will engage with the electrical company to get the information we need to know for things like the trenching and the backup generator.
I think if you had all seen it, we wouldn't be having this.
Yeah, I know, and I feel like it's kind of crazy, so I just do what, you've seen it, I haven't seen it,
Yeah,
so I
okay.
don't know if I can add anything.
Michael,
I got it over here.
or there.
Yep, that's fine.
Okay.
You're on it.
Two things, this engineering, I suppose is the right word, that's gonna cost money, we gotta find money for that somewhere. But I want to be very clear that there is no budgetary cost to the town for building the central office for the broadband.
Right.
That we have contracted with Axiom. Part of our deal with Axiom is that we included in their contract that we would give them $10,000 toward moving the CO. And then we have to buy the equipment for it. That's all there and it's a done deal.
Yep.
So there's no budgetary issue as far as we're concerned.
The budgetary issue that might have an impact on your team, as I understand it, would be anything related to the backup and the tying together of the lines into the backup.
Yeah, the question would be whether the question this consultant has to answer is whether the generator and the service will be adequate.
Correct.
For electrical service.
Yep.
And part of moving the CO would be supplying with electricity. Whether that's done by digging a trench, running a conduit out from the firehouse, or by getting a service from CMP.
Right.
That's not our problem. That's actually the problem.
Gotcha. Okay.
Oh,
Yeah.
I understand.
Yeah. Thank
So,
you.
I mean,
Yeah.
we would. Basically, there has to be a trench from the
Right.
poles, to the firehouse.
Right.
Just to run their electricity out there, nothing else.
Right.
And it makes sense to piggyback fiber conduits in it.
Yep. Yep.
And that's,
Yep.
but that's all, actually probably willing to dig that trench. I don't think
Okay. Well, let's not go there yet, but
there's no details.
Yeah.
I mean, but,
Okay. Thanks. And John had a comment?
why not?
Sorry?
Why not?
Oh, I'm sorry. I saw your hand down. Mark?
Thank you, Beth, for bringing
Yes.
this back, even though we're all a little confused.
Well, I hope it's not me that's making it confusing.
No.
Because, well, I have my notes from the meeting when we all decided we needed to have powers bigger than us to look at this place and expertise, and we do have architect and the electrical or the engineering piece. And hopefully it's gonna make everybody happy by the end of April. And yes, they aren't going to do the work, but they are going to suggest what happens and approximate what we have to deal with and who's gonna pay what.
Yeah.
And I assume the goal being, we don't duplicate efforts. They will be the ones to say you guys can both use the same thing.
Yeah.
And so my only other question before we leave the topic is there a meeting planned with the other towns and the town of Shabig?
That's what we are, once this all gets into place, that we would have a joint meeting with
Okay.
all parties and bringing the people that sign the checks for Maxine and all that. So hopefully we have it all in order. And
And I guess.
Bob, you owe me an apology, so just so you know.
I apologize. I don't,
No, well,
At
I
least
thought
once.
you had sent this and, you know.
David Bruner did not tell me to send it. So just to be clear, but that's an email you didn't see because your email wasn't working. Yes. So Mark, were you finished saying what you were going to say?
No, just very quickly, it's not a big deal that we haven't seen this request for proposals. Because just as Carol said, usually if we review an RFP, it's going out to for multiple individuals to give us quotes. In this case, we're really focusing on Port City, and I think it makes perfect sense. You've already got the contract for the remodeling with them to make this new project, all of the different projects that are going to come together, be another contract that makes perfect sense. Thank you, both.
Yep.
But I do hope you see it, Mark, in case there's something you might want to add to the RFP.
Oh, don't worry, we'll get over there and make unhelpful suggestions.
So,
Yes, Pam.
Maybe it's a question for that. who is administering so this is an RFQ, so there's a lot of confusion because we're one letter off and what type of action we're asking for from the
Okay.
port city. So it's an RFQ, and they will respond with maybe a scope of work, maybe a contract, maybe questions. Who is administering the relationship with them on this,
Who's them?
the consultant company?
The Quad City
Person.
Facilities Committee.
Facilities Committee.
So Beth, you're managing this. Okay.
Beth is the chair of the committee that is
Yes.
managing. Yeah.
With a lot of help.
Yes, yes. Okay. Thank you.
And maybe I'm being too specific in my needs, but I just, where this all started and was not in a proper sequence, I just felt that everybody needs to know everything, that's all.
And
Got it.
I just gotta say, I very much appreciate you bringing that to the board's attention, and I do think this is the correct approach. So despite being a little discombobulated here, I think this is the right way to go. So I appreciate your commitment for that.
Right.
Okay,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Okay. Other business? If not, I have a couple of things to mention. Update on the search for a code officer. We did have a person step forward to serve as interim code officer. And then we had a candidate who came out for an interview. Many of you met. That person was very interested in the job and then became uninterested in the job. And has withdrawn his application. The interim person, who had the expectation that it would be for a few weeks, has since said that she would be willing to stay around longer. And she's done a really nice job so far. And that's about it. One other thing, I would like to suggest that we either require or suggest PDF applications as a way to speed things along. When the interim code officer is out here and when we get a new town administrator in place, I would like to go further with a conversation about how we file building permits, growth permits, electrical permits, plumbing permits in such fashion that they're available for public review at any point in time, but also in a way that facilitates the fact that our code officer is a part-time person who's not in the office every day. And I don't see an easy answer to that, but I think it's worth exploring that question. So if anybody have a problem with the code officer saying, please, if at all possible, send in your applications via PDF? Carol.
I think we should put that on the website with the application information and say preferences. And you could make fillable PDFs as opposed to just straight PDFs, and that would facilitate it. I don't think that's too difficult to do. But I think we need to make it easy for people to do that. So, and I'm not that familiar with the application, so I don't know how complicated that is. But you can also look to other towns that do have primarily electronic submittals and steal their forms and modify them.
I think that's an easy question to solve. I think the harder one is gonna be make it available for anybody online. To view. We don't have a system for that, and so.
So I misspoke if I said that. What I was trying to say was when someone comes into the town office and they want to look at the packet for a given project, that they're able to see it. And so whether they were looking at it on a PDF on the code officer's computer with someone from the town office helping them see it, or whether they were able to pull a paper copy, somebody from the town office was able to pull the paper copy out, which got filled with stuff that came in PDF and then got printed. I don't have the answers to that. The online system of the kind you're describing is out there, but it's a far more complicated project than what we're talking about here. Yeah. And then somebody over here had Mark.
Yeah, I don't have a problem. Did we use the term require to be electronically.
I said require or request. I'm looking for input from you guys on that.
Big request.
We've been sending them to her electronically, and we did that a lot with previous ones, yeah.
Speaking as a builder who can hardly turn a computer on, as long as I have people like David Bruner sending it in, I'll be fine. So you may have to make some accommodations for some people.
Yeah, people come in and we scan them in and send them to them. And I think you're right, it's more common with the local contractors that they don't do it electronically, that they bring it in physically and we just scan it in and send it.
Or
That's
homeowners. Sometimes homeowners are doing it. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Carol.
And I think where it really matters, or where it can be challenging is site plans, so all the site plans that have been submitted for Hope, for example, I believe are in paper form. Because, and when we were over there, we asked them to send them electronically, and he never did, right? So I think that, because that's where it gets difficult for people to review them, even our code enforcement officer, because you have to physically be in the office. So I think that's where I would require, move towards requiring site plans to be submitted electronically. And they're most, typically they would be, prepared in that way.
Correct. What the point I was going to make is that those site plans were produced as a drawing file that then got converted to a PDF that could then be printed. So it's really easy to have that particular type of document that you're describing come in as a PDF. It's harder to print it out. You have to go find a printer. That particular project had a printer in the construction trailer, but back when I was building houses out here, I used to use the library printer because it was 11 by 17 and that was what you needed. So anyway, we can keep working on it.
Require both, but I think for long-term storage, otherwise you gotta scan them, store them digitally.
Right,
Which I don't
right.
think you wanna do.
Right, so.
We don't have a capacity to do it.
No. Michael is gonna.
Yeah, those, I'm gonna reiterate what you said, that nobody now, an architectural drawing by hand.
Right.
This is not site, it's not happening.
Right.
So they're electronic files to begin with. They can be easily made into PDFs.
Okay, I'm gonna ask that we move on past this because we're sneaking up on end time and we've got some stuff to talk about. Go ahead.
Just on the code enforcement officer, what is our employment arrangement with this person? Do we need to make a more formal? It seems like we should have a formal.
We have a formal employment agreement that was drafted by an attorney. She's employed on a per diem basis, which means she can go away and then come back. She's contractually available to us. And she's been appointed as our code officer legally. And that form has been sent into the state.
So does the board need to approve that employment agreement or not?
We did.
Did a couple weeks ago.
Yep.
Yeah.
We voted
Okay.
to appoint her, yes. Yeah.
Did we approve the, did we see a copy of the?
Yes.
I guess we did.
It was drafted by a member of Peter Lowe's office. It was in an email, yeah.
Oh, okay, I didn't see it.
Yes. Okay.
Okay.
Again, I'd like to move past this, but go ahead, Mark. Yes, sir.
I may have missed it.
Okay.
We can.
If you want to see it, send me an email, I'll send it out to you. That was it for other business. Moving on to communications. Got an text message from a citizen who had been assured by two former town administrators, that the dead tree in the town right of way between her house and someone else's house would be removed. She said now it seems to be left up to CMP and CMP doesn't want to remove it. It was a dead tree. So we checked with Maine Municipal and there's correspondence in the packet if anybody wants to read it in detail, but there's quite specific legal precedent and statute in Maine that talks about who has the responsibility for trees in the town right of way. And to sum it up, if the tree is presenting a hazard, if the hazard is presented to the town right of way, cars or people in the town right of way, then the town is legally responsible for removing that hazard. If, on the other hand, the tree that is in the town right of way, its trunk is in the town right of way, if the hazard that's presented is presented to the homeowner's property, structures, whatever, that's a homeowner's responsibility. It's specifically prohibited that the town in Maine spend taxpayers' money removing that tree because the hazard is not to the town or the citizens of the town, it's to one homeowner. So that information's in the packet. While this was all going on, the road commission, which is the four of us, was asked to look at the tree and determine whether it presented a hazard to the road, to the right of way. And before most of us got to see it, the tree was cut down, apparently by the homeowner. So the tree's gone now.
One of the homeowners called me yesterday and said that, FYI, it's being taken care of, or
Which is great.
down.
Yeah. Yeah, but just as a future policy item, when people come to us with issues regarding trees in the public right of way, we can refer back to this communication from Maine Municipal, which cites the Maine statute. And again, it's in the packet.
This is the tree everywhere. Right.
Yeah, this was the tree up on Royal. Yeah.
So a homeowner can cut a tree in a town right of way.
If it's presenting a hazard, yep,
Okay, so that's permitted.
apparently. Yep.
The one thing to keep in mind with that is the town does not have equipment or the manpower
Right.
to handle any kind of large removals, so
Right.
that's why
Yeah.
that led to such a lengthy.
And CMP goes through a similar calculation. I spoke with Lenny about it. CMP goes through a similar evaluation as to whether any such tree, whether it's on homeowner land or a town right of way, if it's presenting a threat to their equipment, then they take steps to deal with the threat. And then the biggest question is who owns the firewood at the end of it? I don't think state law speaks to that. I don't think we have to worry about that too much out here. Mark?
I'll be extremely quick. And I know we're not going to talk about this in depth tonight, but on the other flip side of the coin, any town does have the right and ability to reasonably trim back any trees and bushes that are approaching into the public right away, making it hard for a reasonable passage of two-way traffic. And we do have some situations on this island that probably need to be taken care of, so road commissioner position will be up against it at some point.
I believe that language, that statute refers to that issue, and not just relative to passage, but also relative to views for public safety.
That's right.
For traffic safety. So. All right. That's it for communications that I had. Vika, did you have any communications to talk about?
I had one, speaking of CMP, I received an email from CMP saying that they're extended to invitation for a special presentation and discussion with CMP and Southern Maine municipality customers. It's going to take place on Monday, October 30th between 8:30 and 1 in Augusta. If any valuable member of the community wants to go to, please let them know and RSVP by the 23rd to confirm attendance from municipality. So if there's a board member that's interested in attending that.
What's
instead of
the topic?
half of it. I'm sorry?
Did they say what the topic?
So this event is aimed at fostering meaningful dialogue around subjects relevant to your municipality, such as storm restoration, streetlights, vegetation mitigation, and CMP operations.
So just briefly, somebody from the climate action team might be interested in.
Oh, that'd be cool.
There we go. Oh, do you want me to forward you the email?
Yeah, actually, forward it to Bill.
The double
Danielson.
to Bill? Okay.
Great.
Will do.
Anything else, Vika?
The only other one was an email from JDP Cog, but you were all CC'd on it,
Yeah.
so,
Okay. And it was about an event, right?
yeah.
All right. Communications. Next item to approve the minutes from, oh, sorry, Pam.
There was a communication that was overlooked from the last meeting from Jill. Is it her name? Hanscom, so Gallagher.
Yep.
Gallagher. Is that gonna go into a packet so that people can see it?
She wrote to me later and said, as I understand it, this will come up when we have our public discussions. So it was my fault that I missed it the first time. It just got buried in my stack.
Yeah.
But then after that correspondence, she wrote and said, after I watched the meeting and I think she had a family member here? No, okay, I thought he said he was.
Misunderstanding.
Gotcha. Yeah, so, the further correspondence I got from her referred to the fact that we will be having these public meetings, so I didn't
Okay.
see the need to bring it up again, but
Clarify.
as we discussed before, when we get to a point where we have enough information that we can have a meaningful conversation, there'll be a public workshop of some type talking about what are the options, what are the limitations, what does the DEP have to say, all that kind of thing relative to the barge ramp down it. That's the public conversation I was referring to. Okay. Yeah. All right. Moving on to minutes, the minutes from September 20.
I don't think I was here that day.
Don't list on here who was here.
20th, 27th, and October 4th.
Yep. You were here on the 20th, Scott. Yep.
You were gone last meeting.
It was the October 4th.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of all three of those dates as written on the agenda.
Okay. Carol?
Well, Josh can't vote on one of them, so maybe we should split them.
Okay, which one?
So I make a motion to approve the minutes from September 20th and 27th.
Is there a second? Second by Mark. All in favor? All right, thank you.
And I make a motion that we approve the minutes from October 4th.
And I'll second again.
Carol and Mark. All right, discussion. All in favor? 3 and 1 abstention. And
One question.
yeah,
Normally, you don't normally keep track of the select people that are present at the meeting and who's absent.
It should say, you know, in the vote section. If someone wasn't here,
yeah,
let's see.
it
Like
should.
on October 4th, it says Dowdy absent.
But I mean, sometimes at the, so at the top, you don't, I mean, on the school committee, they just say so is here, and then if it's absent, they just list.
No, but I could do that if I.
I don't know.
I think that'd be great. I mean, just make it easier that way. Shorten the conversation a little bit. All right. Items for future agendas. I wrote down the continuance of the conversation, Mark and Carol coming back with some ideas about the finance ad hoc committee. Further conversation also at that next meeting on the budget schedule. Any other future agenda items of note tonight, Vika or Chris?
Will we have a, do you think a treasurer's report at the next meeting?
I hope so.
So that would be.
Yeah.
Treasury report. Yeah. Mark?
I'm gonna plan to bring something that's going to be a recommendation for the select board to consider an addition / modification to the parking and traffic ordinance, specifically to do with vehicles obstructing public ways.
Yep. Yep. Good
I
one.
will have suggested language.
Good. Others? All right. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second? Second by Carol. All in favor? Thank you. You all. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Adjourned at 8:54.
Hang it to that?
Yeah.
You here tomorrow or work?
Long day.
You know,